5:21 in the evening. The Iranian Central Desert. The Bavar 373 long-range air defense system was already active. This was not a training exercise. In the heart of Semnan Province, the massive phased array radar was pointed nearly vertical. It was not searching for enemy fighters or incoming cruise missiles. It was fixed on a point in the black sky, where no traditional aircraft could fly. Inside the mobile command vehicle, the cooling fans struggled against the lingering desert heat. A young officer watched a stable track on his primary display. The target was moving at 17,000 miles per hour. It was a Milstar 3 satellite. This was a critical node in the American Nuclear Command and Control Network. The officer spoke into his headset. "Commander, we have a stable fire control lock on target Zenith." The response was immediate. "Confirm the track." "Tactical. Systems are not designed for orbital intercept. The lock is solid. The return signal is clean. We are painting the target with high-energy pulses. 7,000 miles away. 10:21 in the morning. Colorado Springs. The watch floor at United States Space Command went from professional quiet to focused chaos in 4 seconds. A sensor technician at Peterson Space Force Base stared at his primary terminal. His displays showed a red aura surrounding the icon for the Milstar 3 satellite. The uplink was experiencing massive high-energy interference. "Sir, we have an active illumination on Milstar 3, the technician shouted. A major stepped behind the console. "Is it solar activity?" The technician shook his head. "Negative. This is a narrow-beam fire control radar. Origin is central Iran. They have a stable lock on the satellite bus." The major looked at the screen. This was technically impossible. A tactical surface-to-air missile system should not have the resolution to lock a target in low Earth orbit. Yet the data was undeniable. The Bavar 373 was performing, a feat of engineering that defied American intelligence assessments. The Milstar system provides the secure communications link for the President of the United States. It is the backbone of the nuclear triad. If this satellite went dark, the ability to coordinate a strategic response would be severely degraded. This was an act of aggression without a single missile leaving the rail. In the Iranian desert, the radar array continued to pulse. The energy was invisible to the naked eye. But in the electromagnetic spectrum, it was a blinding searchlight. The system was now feeding, targeting data to a computer that had never been programmed for space warfare. The Iranian commander watched the telemetry. "They know we are watching them. Hold the lock. Do not deviate." In Colorado, the major picked up the secure line to the National Military Command Center. "This is Space Command. We have a confirmed fire control lock on a strategic asset. I repeat, a nuclear command node is being targeted by Iranian ground forces, requesting immediate escalation protocol." The morning in Colorado was cold and bright. The evening in Iran was burning and dark. Both sides were now staring at the same point in space. One side was testing a new power. The other side was calculating a response. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 5:24 in the evening. Semnan Province, Iran. Inside the command van, the air was thick with the smell of ozone and hot electronics. Colonel Rezai watched the green line on his screen. It was perfectly straight. The American satellite was performing what the Americans called a reactive jitter. It was firing small bursts from its maneuvering thrusters to break the radar reflection. This was a standard automated defense for a multi-billion-dollar strategic asset. Rezai spoke calmly into his headset. "The Zenith algorithm is compensating. The beam is following the target trajectory." The technician beside him nodded. His hands moved quickly over the keyboard. "The lock is sticky. Colonel, we have a 98% probability of a successful intercept solution. If we had a missile on the rail, it would have a clear path." "Do not engage," Rezai said. "We are only here to show them the door is unlocked. We are proving that their high ground is no longer out of reach." 10:24 in the morning. Colorado Springs. The blue light of the tactical displays reflected in specialist Sarah Miller's headset. She felt a cold knot in her stomach. The Milstar 3 satellite was burning precious hydrazine fuel. It was an automated defensive maneuver triggered by the onboard sensors. Usually, a radar lock from a ground station would be broken in seconds by such a shift, but the icon on her screen remained boxed in bright red. "The lock is holding," Miller said. Her voice was thin. "Milstar 3 is at its maximum maneuver limit. The Iranian array is still on it. They are predicting the thruster burns." General Vance walked onto the floor of the Combat Information Center. He did not look at the screens immediately. He looked at the faces of his airmen. He saw the tension in their shoulders. He knew what a lock on a Milstar meant. It was the equivalent of a sniper putting a laser dot on the forehead of the person holding the nuclear keys. Vance leaned over the console. "Give me the National Military Command Center. Now." The specialist hit a single button. "Line is open, sir. The Pentagon is on standby." Vance spoke into the secure link. "This is General Vance at Space Command. We are witnessing a non-kinetic engagement of a strategic nuclear asset. The target is Milstar 3. The attacker is using an advanced fire control radar from the Semnan region of Iran. We have attempted 3 orbital shifts. The lock remains stable. This is not a glitch. This is a deliberate demonstration of an advanced anti-satellite capability." A voice came through the speaker. It was the duty officer at the Pentagon. "General, confirm if the satellite systems are still operational for emergency traffic." "They are functional for now," Vance said, "but the Iranian beam is saturating the uplink. We are losing bandwidth for the emergency action messages. If they increase the power of that radar, the satellite will go deaf. The president will lose the ability to talk to the submarine fleet in the Indian Ocean." 5:28 in the evening, Iran. Colonel Reza received a notification on his secondary tablet. It was a high-priority signal from the Revolutionary Guard headquarters in Tehran. The message was encrypted and brief. "Colonel," the voice said over the secure link, "increase the pulse repetition frequency. We want to see how the Americans react when the signal starts to bleed." Rezai hesitated. His finger hovered over the touchscreen. "Commander, if we increase power to that level, we might fry the sensitive receivers on the satellite. If the hardware is damaged, it could be interpreted as a kinetic strike. It is no longer just a lock. It is an attack." "That is an order," the voice replied. "They need to understand that their shield is made of glass. Turn up the heat." The colonel reached for the power dial on the console. He slowly rotated the physical knob. The Bavar 373 array outside began to hum with a new, higher pitch. On the screen, the American satellite icon began to flicker. Its telemetry was starting to degrade. The satellite was no longer just being watched, it was being blinded. 10:32 in the morning. The Pentagon. Deep beneath the heavy concrete of the National Military Command Center, the air was filtered and cool. The room was designed to survive a nuclear strike. Today, it was the center of a different kind of war. The Secretary of Defense sat at the head of the long conference table. On the massive digital wall, a map of the Persian Gulf was centered. On the Semnan Province of Iran, a brigadier general stood and pointed to a flashing red icon in low Earth orbit. "Sir, Space Command reports that Milstar 3 is losing its downlink. The Iranian Bavar 373 radar is saturating the satellite transponders. We are currently at 20% capacity for emergency action messages." The secretary looked at the display. "Explain the risk to the nuclear triad. Be precise." The general did not hesitate. "If we lose this node, our strategic assets in the Pacific and the Indian Ocean will go dark. The submarine fleet would have to rely on terrestrial radio. It is slower. It is less secure. The president would lose the ability to issue an immediate launch order to 30% of our nuclear force." The room went silent for 5 seconds. This was the scenario that war games usually ended with. The secretary spoke again. "What are our options for neutralization?" "We have the USS Gravely in the North Arabian Sea," the general said. "It is an Arleigh Burke-class destroyer. It is equipped with advanced electronic warfare suites. We can order the ship to jam the Iranian ground station, but that requires moving the ship within 100 miles of the Iranian coast. They will see it as a provocation. 5:32 in the evening, central Iran. Inside the cramped command van, the air was heavy. The cooling fans were failing. Colonel Rezai watched the data throughput on his primary screen. The American satellite was no longer fighting the lock. It was simply trying to survive the energy wash. The Project Zenith prototype was performing better than any simulation. The technician looked up. "Colonel, we are detecting a shift in the American naval posture. A destroyer is breaking away from the carrier strike group. It is heading north at 30 knots. Rezai felt a drop of sweat run down his neck. They are sending a jammer. They want to cut our line to the sky. If that ship gets close enough, it will blind our radar array. Should we adjust the beam to target the ship?" the technician asked. "No," Rezai said. "The order is to keep the lock on the satellite. We must show them that their orbital command post is vulnerable. If we target the ship, we lose the strategic leverage in space." Back in Washington, the tension was shifting. The decision-making process was moving faster than the tactical reality. The Secretary of Defense turned to a civilian analyst. "How long until the president is on the line?" 3 minutes, sir," the analyst replied. "The Situation Room is being prepped." The secretary looked back at the screen. The red aura around Milstar 3 was growing. The interference was spreading to neighboring frequencies. This is not just a lock anymore, it was a digital siege. "Tell the USS Gravely to increase speed," the secretary ordered. "Tell them to prepare for an active electronic countermeasure engagement. I want that Iranian radar blinded before the president sits down. We need to give him a response window that does not involve a nuclear crisis." The general nodded. He spoke into his secure headset. "Gravely, this is the National Military Command Center. You are cleared for high-energy jamming. Engage the Semnan target upon arrival at the station." The orders were out. The machines were moving. In the desert and on the sea, two powers were racing toward a collision. The president was about to join the conversation. The window for a peaceful resolution was closing by the second. 5:38 in the evening, the North Arabian Sea. The deck of the USS Gravely hummed with the vibration of 4 gas turbine engines. The Arleigh Burke-class destroyer was cutting through the swells at 32 knots. White spray arched high over the bow, falling back into the dark water. Inside the Combat Information Center, the atmosphere was blue and cold. The electronic warfare officer looked at his primary console. The signal from the Semnan site is increasing in intensity. They are using a multi-beam pulse. It is designed to overwhelm the satellite receivers. The captain of the Gravely stood behind the console. "Distance to the target? We are 95 nautical miles from the coast," the officer replied. "We are within the effective range of our electronic attack suite. We can put a wall of noise between that radar and the sky." "Execute," the captain said. "Initiate the electronic countermeasures. I want that link broken now." On the mast of the ship, the electronic warfare antennas came to life. They began to flood the atmosphere with high-powered radio frequency energy. The goal was simple. The Gravely was trying to drown out the Iranian radar signal before it reached the upper atmosphere. 5:40 in the evening, central Iran. Inside the command van, the audio speakers began to hiss with static. The smooth green line on the display suddenly began to vibrate. It broke into a jagged sawtooth pattern. "Colonel!" the technician shouted. "We have incoming interference. It is the American destroyer. They are jamming our primary uplink frequency." Colonel Rezai looked at the signal strength meter. It was fluctuating wildly. The American ship was powerful. It was throwing a massive amount of energy into the air. "Switch to the Project Zenith secondary mode," Rezai ordered. "Engage the frequency hopping algorithm. Move the beam through the spectrum faster than their jammer can track." The technician's fingers flew across the glass panel. "The algorithm is active. We are jumping 500 times per second." The jagged line on the screen stabilized for a moment. The Iranian system was more advanced than the Americans had predicted. It was not just a radar. It was an adaptive system. It was finding the small gaps in the American jamming and punching through. 5:42 in the evening, Tehran. Inside the Iranian Aerospace Command Center, a brigadier general watched the dual telemetry. He saw the American ship closing the distance. He saw the satellite struggling to maintain its link. "The Americans are escalating," the general said. "They are trying to blind us in our own territory. If they continue to increase power, it will interfere with our civilian communications. This is an attack on our sovereignty." He picked up a secure phone. "Prepare the shore-based anti-ship batteries. If that destroyer crosses the 12-mile limit, they are to be painted with fire control radar. We will not be bullied in the Persian Gulf." 10:42 in the morning. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense watched the live feed from the Gravely. The Secretary of Defense watched the live feed from the Gravely. The jamming was not working as expected. The Iranian signal was still reaching the Milstar 3 node. "They are frequency hopping," a technical analyst explained. "Their radar is dancing around our jammer. It is a very sophisticated piece of software. We are not breaking the lock." The secretary turned to the brigadier general. "What is our next move? If we cannot jam them from the sea, how do we stop that lock?" "We have to take out the source," the general said quietly. "Or we have to move another asset into the area that they cannot ignore. We need to force them to choose between the satellite and a more immediate threat." The secretary looked at the map. "What is available?" "We have a B-21 Raider on a long-duration test flight over the Indian Ocean," the general replied. "It is the most advanced stealth bomber in the world. It is the most advanced stealth bomber in the world. It is invisible to their standard radar. We can divert it toward the Iranian coast. It will send a message that we are ready to strike the Semnan site if they do not disengage." The Secretary of Defense leaned forward. "Divert the bomber. Tell the pilot to fly a penetration profile. Let them see a ghost on their screens that they cannot track." The order was sent. The most expensive aircraft in history changed its heading. The game of chicken was no longer being played in space. It was moving toward the ground. The president was about to join the conversation. The window for a peaceful resolution was closing by the second. 5:48 in the evening, high over the northern Indian Ocean. The cockpit of the B-21 Raider was a cathedral of low-light displays and silence. The aircraft was a smooth charcoal gray shape that absorbed the fading sunlight. It was designed to be invisible. To the radar arrays of the world, the billion-dollar bomber was the size of a large bird. Inside the helmet of the mission commander, a voice crackled with digital clarity. "Ghost 6-1. This is Global Strike Command. You are cleared to enter the Iranian Air Defense Identification Zone. Maintain a low observable profile. Do not arm your payload. Your mission is to provide a tactical distraction." The pilot adjusted the throttle. "Copy. Ghost 6-1 is entering the zone. We are painting the Semnan site with our passive sensors. We have the lock." The B-21 was not just a bomber. It was a flying sensor node. It began to feed data back to the Pentagon in real time. It was looking for the specific electromagnetic signature of the Bavar 373 radar. 5:52 in the evening. Central Iran. Colonel Rezai stared at his secondary monitor. A new alarm was chirping. It was a low-priority warning from the long-range early warning system. On the coast, it was a faint return, a momentary flicker on the edge of the screen that disappeared as soon as it arrived. "Colonel," the technician said, "we have a ghost. 10 o'clock. Altitude, 50,000 feet. Speed Mach 0.8. Rezai leaned in. "Is it a civilian flight?" "Negative," the technician replied. "The transponder is silent. The radar cross-section is inconsistent. It is appearing and disappearing. It is a stealth profile." Rezai looked at the primary screen. The lock on the Milstar 3 satellite was still stable. But now, a new threat was approaching from the south. The Americans were not just jamming from the sea. They were putting a knife to his throat from the air. "Should we shift the radar to find the ghost?" the technician asked. "No," Rezai said. "If we shift the radar, we lose the lock on the satellite. That is exactly what they want. They are trying to bait us into revealing our full tracking capability. Stay on the satellite. Tell the coastal batteries to handle the intruder." 5:55 in the evening. The Persian Gulf. The USS Gravely was now 80 miles from the Iranian coast. On the bridge, the tactical officer reported a new development. "Captain, We are being painted. Shore-based fire control radar. It is a NOR anti-ship missile battery. They have a solid lock on us. The captain gripped the edge of the chart table. Status of our defenses? Aegis is in auto special mode, the officer said. We have the interceptors ready. If they launch, we have 6 seconds to react. The situation was now a series of interlocking triggers. If the foreign battery fired at the ship would fire back at the coast. If the coastal battery fired, the B-21 might interpret it as an attack and engage the Semnan site. Every unit was committed. Every weapon was 1 heartbeat away from a launch sequence. 10:58 in the morning. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense looked at the clock. The president would be in the Situation Room in 2 minutes. The map was now a cluster of red and blue icons. They were all overlapping. The B-21 is inside their zone, the Brigadier General said. The Iranians are holding the lock on the satellite, but they are also locking our destroyer. They are not backing down. Neither are we, the secretary said. Tell the Gravely to stay on station. Tell Ghost 6-1 to move closer. If they want to play this game, we will show them how close we can get before they even see us coming. The commitment was total. Both nations had pushed their most advanced assets into a space smaller than a single province. The tension had moved beyond strategic signaling. It was now a tactical powder keg. The world was waiting for the first person to blink. 6:01 and 30 seconds in the evening. The Iranian desert. Inside the command van, the temperature was 40 degrees Celsius. The equipment was screaming. Colonel Rezai watched the data stream for Project Zenith. The American satellite was almost completely silent now. The uplink was buried under a wall of Iranian energy. "Colonel," the technician shouted. "The Ghost, it just bloomed. The radar cross-section just quadrupled." Rezai's heart hammered. It opened its bay doors. It is preparing to release ordnance. 6:02 in the evening, high over the coast. In the cockpit of the B-21, the pilot watched his synthetic vision display. A red box sat over the Semnan site. The bomber's computer had a perfect solution. The pilot keyed his radio. "Control, Ghost 6-1 has a solid track on the emitter. Bay doors are open for signal demonstration. We are 3 seconds from the release window." The response from Global Strike Command was immediate. Ghost 6-1. Hold. Do not release. I repeat. Do not release. 6:02 and 30 seconds in the evening. The Persian Gulf. The USS Gravely was vibrating. The ship was at general quarters. On the bridge, the captain watched the shore-based radar warnings. "Captain," the tactical action officer said, "the NOR battery has switched to continuous wave illumination. They are in the terminal guidance phase. They are about to launch. Arm the phalanx," the captain ordered. "Prepare the evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. If they launch one, we take the whole battery. Out." 11:02 and 30 seconds in the morning. The Pentagon. The Secretary of Defense stood up. He was looking at a screen that showed the jet's position. It was a spearhead pointed at the heart of Iran. "Sir," the Brigadier General said, "Space Command reports Milstar 3 has gone into safe mode. The Iranian beam has triggered a hardware shutdown. We have lost the link. The President is in the room." The President of the United States sat down. He did not look at the Secretary. He looked at the map. "What is the status of the bomber?" "It is over the target, Mr. President," the Secretary said. "Its doors are open. The Iranians are painting our ship. We are at the edge." 6:03 in the evening, Central Iran. Colonel Rezai reached for the master arm switch on the Bavar 373 console. He looked at the technician. The technician's face was white. "They are going to strike us," the technician whispered. "Not if we strike the ship first," Rezai said. "Initiate the launch sequence for the coastal battery. We must defend the site." The command was entered. A digital signal traveled from the desert to the coast. In a hidden bunker near the water, a solid-state rocket motor began its ignition sequence. In the air, the B-21 pilot saw the thermal bloom on his sensors. "Control. Launch detected. Surface to surface. I am engaging the emitter." The pilot's finger moved to the release button. On the USS Gravely, the siren for incoming missiles began to wail. Every sensor was saturated. Every weapon was hot. 3 separate combat systems were milliseconds away from starting a Third World War. 6:03 and 15 seconds in the evening. Peterson Space Force Base. Specialist Sarah Miller was no longer looking at the red icon of the satellite. She was looking at the raw binary stream. Something was wrong with the physics of the interference. A fire control radar from the ground should show a specific decay pattern as it travels through the ionosphere. This signal was too clean. It was too perfect. "Sir," Miller shouted. Her voice cracked. "Look at the packet headers on the Milstar downlink. The interference is not coming from the ground. It is coming from the satellite." General Vance stepped closer. "That is impossible. The satellite is the target." "No, sir," Miller said. Her fingers blurred across the keys. "The Bavar 373 radar is not painting the satellite. It is acting as a reflector. The signal is originating from a ground station in Maryland. It is being bounced off the Iranian radar array and back to the satellite. It is a loopback, a digital hall of mirrors." 6:03 and 30 seconds in the evening. The Iranian desert. Colonel Rezai had his finger on the final confirmation button for the coastal battery launch. But the button did not respond. The entire glass console of the Bavar 373 suddenly flickered. The green tracking lines turned into a series of rapidly scrolling hexadecimal code. "Colonel," the technician cried out, "we have lost command of the array. The system is slaving itself to an external source. We are no longer transmitting a search beam, we are acting as a relay." Rezai pulled back. "Abort the coastal launch. Kill the power to the main array." "I cannot," the technician said. "The software is locked. Someone is using our hardware to simulate a combat engagement. We are being framed." 6:03 and 45 seconds in the evening. The Situation Room. The president watched the screen. The B-21 was 1 second from releasing a precision-guided bomb that would ignite a regional war. "Stop the strike!" A voice boomed over the speakers. It was the director of the National Security Agency. "Mr. President, this is not an Iranian provocation. We have a confirmed breach at the Fairmont Satellite Tracking Station in Maryland. A third party has hijacked the Milstar command frequency. They are using the Iranian radar as a physical mirror to mask the origin of the attack." The president did not hesitate. Ghost 6-1. Abort. 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 6:04 in the evening. High over the Iranian coast. The pilot of the B-21 felt the aircraft lurch as the automated system attempted to release the weapon. He overrode the command with a physical lever. The bay doors remained open, but the bomb stayed on the rack. Ghost 6. "One copy," the pilot said. His breath was heavy. In the mask. "Aborting release. Closing doors. I am breaking right. Breaking right." The thermal bloom of the coastal missile battery suddenly vanished from his sensors. The missile that had been seconds from ignition had suffered a total system crash. The entire Iranian air defense network was going dark. 6:05 in the evening. The Persian Gulf. On the bridge of the USS Gravely, the siren stopped as abruptly as it had started. The tactical action officer stared at his screen in disbelief. "Captain, the Noor battery has stopped emitting. The fire control lock is gone. All Iranian shore signals have vanished. It is like they just pulled the plug on the entire province." The captain wiped sweat from his forehead. "Status of the B-21? He is clear, sir. He is heading back to the tanker. The sky is empty." The crisis had reached its peak and collapsed in the span of 90 seconds. The most advanced weapons on the planet had been neutralized, not by each other, but by a ghost in the machine. In the silence that followed, a new and more terrifying realization began to dawn on both sides. The Iranian radar was not the weapon. It was the bait, and someone had almost successfully used the American military to destroy an Iranian asset based on a lie. 6:06 in the evening. Central Iran. The command van was silent. The only sound was the clicking of cooling metal. As the Bavar 373 array powered down into a forced restart, Colonel Rezai sat in the dim light of the emergency lamps. He looked at his hands. They were shaking. He had been seconds away from starting a war that his country could not win, based on data that was not his own. "Colonel," the technician whispered, "the system is rebooting. The Zenith logs show a remote override. Someone accessed the core operating system through a maintenance backdoor we did not know existed." Rezai stood up and opened the heavy steel door of the van. The desert air was cooling, but the ground still radiated heat. It was not the Americans. They were as confused as we were. Their bomber had us. They could have fired. They chose not to. Who was it then? Rezai looked at the stars. Someone who wants us to kill each other. Someone who knows our systems better than we do. 11:06 in the morning. Fort Meade, Maryland. Inside the secure vaults of United States Cyber Command, the atmosphere was frantic. General Vance was on a video link from Colorado. On the main screen, a map of Maryland showed a single red dot at a civilian-run satellite ground station. "We have the breach point," a Cyber Command analyst said. "The Fairmont facility. It is a secondary uplink site managed by a private contractor. 3 minutes ago, a localized server blade was physically destroyed by an internal thermite charge. The hardware is melted. But we caught the tail end of the outgoing traffic." "Where was it going?" Vance asked. "It was a coordinated dual stream," the analyst explained. "Stream 1 went to the Milstar 3 satellite, mimicking a command signal. Stream 2 went to the Iranian radar site via a commercial satellite bridge. They used the Iranian radar as a physical bounce point. They were using the Iranian hardware to reflect the jammer signal back at our own satellite." Vance leaned back. "They made it look like Iran was jamming us, while simultaneously locking the Iranian weapons into an automated defense mode. They were driving both cars from the back seat." 6:15 in the evening. The North Arabian Sea. The USS Gravely had slowed to 15 knots. The crew remained at general quarters, but the tension had shifted from adrenaline to a cold, analytical dread. On the bridge, the captain watched the Iranian coast. The shore batteries were dark. The radar painting had stopped. The radio buzzed. It was a bridge-to-bridge. Frequency used for maritime safety. It was unencrypted. "American destroyer. This is Iranian Coast Guard Station 9. The captain picked up the handset. "This is Gravely. We hear you." A long pause followed. The voice that came back was professional, but strained. "We have experienced a total system failure of our coastal defense network. We are not preparing for further engagement. We are investigating a massive internal interference." The captain looked at his executive officer. "Copy that, Station 9. We are also investigating a technical anomaly. We are maintaining our position in international waters. We have no intention of entering your zone." "Copy, Gravely," the Iranian voice replied. "Let us hope. The investigators are faster than the pilots." The communication ended. It was the first time in decades that both sides had spoken with such blunt honesty during a live engagement. The realization was setting in. Both the American and Iranian military structures had been weaponized against each other by a non-state actor with deep-level access to their tactical networks. In Washington, the president remained in the Situation Room. He looked at the director of the NSA. "I want to know who has that kind of access, and I want to know why they stopped." "Maybe they didn't stop, Mr. President," the director replied. "Maybe they just finished the first phase of the test." 6:30 in the evening. Tehran and Washington. The direct hotline between the National Military Command Center and the Iranian General Staff was rarely used. It was a relic of a more stable era, a line of last resort. Today, the red light on the console was a steady, urgent pulse. The American Secretary of Defense spoke into the handset. His voice was measured. "General, we have identified a third-party breach in our civilian command infrastructure. Our satellite was manipulated by an external signal. We believe your Bavar 373 system was also compromised. There was a 5-second delay as the translator worked. The Iranian general responded from a bunker beneath Tehran. We have reached the same conclusion, Secretary. Our systems were slave to a protocol we did not authorize. Our coastal batteries were activated by a remote trigger. We have executed a manual shutdown of all automated response networks. We are doing the same, the Secretary said. The B-21 is returning to base. The USS Gravely is holding position. We are declaring a cooling-off period of 72 hours. We propose a data-sharing protocol to identify the signature of this intrusion. A pause. We agree, the general replied. For today, the enemy of my enemy is not my friend, but he is a shared problem. 6:40 in the evening. The Iranian desert. Colonel Rezai stood outside the command van, watching the moon rise over the salt flats. The massive radar array was now angled down, its face dark and silent. The hum of the cooling fans had died away, replaced by the natural stillness of the desert night. The technician walked out and handed him a bottle of water. Tehran says we are to dismantle the Zenith prototype immediately. They want the hard drives flown to the capital for forensic analysis. Rezai took a sip. They are afraid. Of the Americans? No, Rezai said, looking at the dark horizon. They are afraid of the ghost. We spent 10 years building a system to stop a missile. We never built a system to stop a line of code. We were ready for a war of steel. We almost died in a war of light. 6:45 in the evening. Colorado Springs. The watch floor at Space Command had returned to its standard dim lighting. Specialist Sarah Miller sat at her desk, staring at a frozen frame of the Milstar 3 telemetry. The red aura was gone. The satellite was back in its designated orbital slot, its thrusters quiet. General Vance walked over and put a hand on her shoulder. Good catch on those packet headers, Specialist. You saved a lot of lives today. Thank you, sir, she said. She didn't look up. But I keep thinking about the timing. The hack triggered the Iranian defense, which triggered our automated response, which triggered their coastal batteries. It was a perfect loop. If we had been 10 seconds slower on the override, the Gravely would be at the bottom of the Gulf and the Semnan site would be a crater. But it didn't happen, Vance said. This time, Miller replied. But whoever did this now knows exactly how we react. They just calibrated their stopwatch. The crisis had ended. No missiles had flown. No blood had been spilled. But, as the technicians across 2 continents began the long process of scrubbing their servers, the feeling was not one of victory. It was the realization that the high ground of space was no longer a sanctuary. It was a front line where the rules were written in a language they were only beginning to understand. 6:45 in the evening. The Iranian Central Desert. The radar array of the Bavar 373 made a final, heavy mechanical sound as it locked into its stowed position. The dust stirred by the cooling fans began to settle. Colonel Rezai stood by the heavy transport vehicle, watching the last of the support trucks prepare for the move back to Tehran. The desert was returning to its natural state of silence. On his handheld terminal, the final report from the Project Zenith diagnostic team appeared. The system was clean. The intrusive code had deleted itself as soon as the American bomber had turned away. It was a digital suicide mission. The evidence was vanishing into the architecture of the motherboard. 3 days later, the Pentagon. The briefing room was crowded with intelligence officials and strategic analysts. The Secretary of Defense sat at the head of the table. A large screen displayed a simplified diagram of the orbital Pearl Harbor that had almost occurred. The Brigadier General pointed to the center of the diagram. Our forensic team at the Fairmont facility found the remains of the thermite charge. It was professional grade. This was not a hobbyist or a small group of activists. This was a state-level operation designed to look like a regional conflict. The attribution, the Secretary asked. Inconclusive, the General replied. The code has signatures from 3 different nations. It is a mosaic of different cyber warfare styles. But the objective is clear. They wanted a kinetic exchange between the United States and Iran. They wanted us to destroy their air defense infrastructure, and they wanted Iran to sink a destroyer. The goal was a total breakdown of the regional security architecture. The Secretary of Defense looked at the satellite imagery of the Semnan site. It was now an empty patch of desert. And the Milstar node? It is fully operational, the general said. But we have moved it to a different orbital plane. We are currently auditing every civilian contractor with access to our ground stations. The vulnerability was not in our space assets. It was in the human element on the ground. Military analysis would later define this event as a proxy signal engagement. It was a new category of warfare, where the combatants are not the ones pulling the trigger, but the ones being manipulated into pulling it. The incident proved that in the age of integrated tactical networks, the greatest threat is not a missile launch, but a false signal. Strategic experts agreed that the disaster was avoided only because of human intervention. The automated systems on both sides had worked exactly as they were designed to. They had detected a threat and prepared a response. If the decision-making had been left entirely to the algorithms, the war would have started at 6:03 in the evening. In Tehran, a similar debriefing was taking place. The Iranian government did not publicize the incident. They quietly replaced the leadership of the Semnan Air Defense District. But the lesson was the same. The Bavar system was powerful, but it was now a known quantity. Its electronic signature had been mapped by the American bomber. The strategic advantage of the new radar was gone. The incident at Semnan remains classified in both nations. To the world, it was just another quiet evening in the Persian Gulf. No missiles flew, no ships were lost. But history had shifted by a fraction of a second. Modern warfare is decided not by who fires first, but by who chooses not to fire at all. In the silence of the Iranian desert and the cold halls of the Pentagon, both sides realized that their most advanced weapons were only as reliable as the signals they received. And in the next conflict, the signal might be a lie that neither side can catch. The high ground of space remains occupied. The satellites continue to orbit in the dark. Below them, the world remains on a hair trigger, waiting for the next ghost to appear on the screen.